On the Big App Show today, author of a book that I enjoyed thoroughly, and when I say that, it means, besides the fact that I really enjoyed it, I actually had to spend 2 days reading the book. It was a little bit more than I thought it would be, but man, is it good. We have William Landay, who we agreed prior, I'm allowed to call you Bill. Welcome to the Big App Show.
Thanks for having me.
So, man, okay. Let me just start with the obvious question that every other bogus reporter will ask. When's the movie coming out?
Well, it's funny you should ask. We just, it was just optioned for film just 2 days ago.
Great.
So it was just bought. A producer has been attached, but that is the actual movie, if it happens, would be several years down the road. It takes, the time a book is optioned, it takes a year just to get a screenplay.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a long process, but anyone who reads this book immediately will go like, oh, please. In fact, I would say this is the kind of book that makes me happy I don't have time to watch television, because it's so much better than anything that is on. I mean, it was just fantastic. It's also one of these books that's kind of hard to discuss because there's so much you don't want to give away. It's called Defending Jacob, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And let me also say, I love the physical aspects of this book. I'm really big into that. You know, the raised lettering. It's all beautiful. The color is fantastic.
It's really well made. It's really well made. About 3/4 of our sales have been ebooks, and a lot of readers will not appreciate that. And in fact, one thing that really is lost is part of the book is told in the form of grand jury transcripts, and in the print version of the book, they actually look like transcripts. They're in a different font and a different layout. An ebook reader can't reproduce that because it can only use the fonts that are resident on the machine. So
exactly.
Ebook readers, they really are missing out on a little bit of the actual book design.
Yeah, it'll probably be hard to show here, but yeah, it's like it's that WordPerfect 5.3, you know, that all lawyers. Does the legal profession still use WordPerfect, or has that finally migrated to something else?
I have to tell you, I am the last living human being still using WordPerfect. That novel was written on WordPerfect when I was in college. This must have been 1983 or something. A friend of mine had an early K-Pro computer, one of those suitcases.
Right on. Yeah.
He had WordPerfect on that thing, and I've been using WordPerfect ever since. I can't get used to Word. I can't get used to anything else.
Well, then you're a keyboard guy as well. It's like you know, all the shortcuts, and I say that, and a lot of people, like I have a 21-year-old daughter, and if I say WordPerfect, you know, it's like crickets start chirping in the room. It's like, what? Like, you mean Word? No, WordPerfect. It was something different.
WordPerfect used to dominate.
And this is a so it doesn't, right? I mean, the legal profession has now moved on. It's no longer WordPerfect.
Yes, that is. Well, a lot of lawyers still use WordPerfect, but less than there used to be, and it seems to be slipping away finally.
Yeah, well, I think Microsoft is making a killing on all this crap of, you know, forcing people to upgrade, and so then all the lawyers and the whole legal field has to migrate up, otherwise your documents aren't compatible. And I've never been in criminal court. I have been in civil court, and I've filed S1 documents and done a lot of legal things, so I understand. I went through that entire WordPerfect process, which was fascinating to me. It couldn't, you know, it had to be 5.1, you know, it couldn't be 5.0 and all this stuff. But back to the book, Bill. I was almost sad that I'd already knew kind of what the premise was, which was given away by, you know, the marketing materials, etc., because there's so many different things that happen in this book that are surprising all the way up until the end, that, you know, I almost felt robbed that we know that this is about a suburb of Boston. There's a murder that takes place in school, and the assistant district attorney, turns out his son becomes the prime suspect. I don't even know how much more to tell from here, and I'd love for you to give kind of your standard explanation of the book, because I'm afraid I don't want to give anything away because there's so many turns here.
The book is really tightly wound, and that makes it hard to discuss, because the minute you start talking about it, you start giving away spoilers. But I've sort of come to the conclusion that you do have to talk about the book if you expect people to buy it.
Right? So yeah, it does help.
Talk about it a little bit. I also feel like, since the title is Defending Jacob, you know that Jacob has to be defended, so that's not giving too much away.
True.
So the story, as you say, is about a teenage boy in a suburb of Boston called Newton, which is where I live and where I'm sitting right now. His dad, the boy's dad, is a senior level prosecutor in a district attorney's office near Boston, the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, which is where I actually worked for most of the 1990s. He is sent out on a routine murder, or what seems like a routine murder. A boy has been stabbed in a nearby park. He's been stabbed 3 times across the chest and thrown down a ravine and left there to bleed out. And the narrator, this senior level prosecutor, goes to investigate that crime, and the case kind of boomerangs back on his family as the evidence starts to point to his own 14-year-old son, who's a classmate of the dead boy. And so that's the premise, and it sort of builds to, it's building through an investigation and a trial, which when you hear that setup, it sounds like an ordinary crime story, honestly. And I think what separates it from the run of crime stories is the depth of the portrayal of this family. So often first of all, so often the villains in these stories are one-dimensional, they're flat, they're monsters. This is an ordinary boy in an ordinary family, and we follow this family. We don't just follow them through the investigation. We watch them, as they go to court and as they come home and as they sit around the dinner table. We see the effect of this case on this family, which has been accused. And this is, when you watch Law and Order or when you read, sort of ordinary mysteries, you tend to stick to the story itself, and that's a matter of pacing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's unusual to follow a defendant in one of these cases, and it's unusual to follow him in the quiet moments outside of the investigation and outside of the courtroom. And it really gives you a fuller and richer picture of who these people are. And, ideally, it's not for me to say, of course, but ideally you attach to these characters. And so, as with any great dramatic experience, whether it's a novel or movie or theater or whatever it is, you feel this story more deeply. It's enjoyable to watch Law and Order, but nobody ever cried at the end of a Law and Order episode. Nobody ever lay awake about a Law and Order episode. So this really has been received with a sort of enthusiasm that I never anticipated, and it's just people feel it very deeply, and it's because these are real characters who really feel like real people and enter into readers' lives.
And I would say that all good novels are written with some, if not a lot, of autobiographical experience. Of course, I do know that you were an assistant district attorney or a district attorney.
An assistant district attorney. The elected official is the district attorney. All the other lawyers in the office are assistant DAs.
Right, and you even position kind of that friction between the DA and the ADA in the book as well. But I totally agree that really almost from the get-go, but then we have the 179 days before the trial begins. I totally fell in love with the whole idea of what this family was going through, and man, so recognizable. You must have kids. There's no other way.
I do have kids, but my kids are a little younger. I have 2 little boys. They're 8 and 10 years old.
They're old enough to get into trouble like this. They're old enough. Yeah.
I can anticipate where they're headed, but they're not where Jacob Barber is quite yet.
Right.
But Jacob is in that awkward age before, around 16 or 18, you become cool again. But, there's an awkward in-between stage in adolescence, and he's there. And, for anyone who has known teenagers in this age or been a teenager at that age, this will feel awfully familiar. We've all been there.
Well, even worse than that, at a certain point, Andy, the father and the assistant district attorney, he starts to realize that he doesn't really know his son as well as he thought he knew his son, and that his wife actually had recognized a whole bunch of things and knew things about her son which he might have dismissed. And that is so recognizable, I think, to any parent. You're like, wow, did we ever really talk about that? And what were we thinking? And did I do it right? What have I done wrong? I mean, it really is. It's a love story in a way, I think. It's not in the traditional sense, but it really is a story about the love within the family and what you can go through. And for that, it was just, outstanding.
It's true. And that's, that's an important thing because, these parents are feeling what every parent feels at some point. You know, when you have your baby, when they hand the baby to you in the hospital, it's this sort of nonverbal little blob, and you can project whatever you want onto the baby. And, you know, that baby is truly yours, and you have a meaningful connection with it at the beginning. And as the baby grows up and becomes an adolescent and then a young adult, you know, it's a gradual separation. And so when we reach those teenage years, the child is pulling away from you. You're learning less and less, and there's a gradual estrangement between parent and child that, you know, it's more or less apparent in different families, but every family feels it a little bit. And it's hard for parents to go through that process of separating from your own child and giving him up to go off, and, you know, you're getting ready for the big separation when the kid goes off into his own life or her own life. And so, you know, most readers who read this book will not have a child who's accused of murder, but every parent who reads this book will know that feeling of feeling that separation, that tug, as the child begins to pull away from you, and it's heartbreaking. And I think every kid who reads it, or everyone who has been a kid, knows that feeling of sort of beginning to separate from your parents and feeling, you know, misunderstood, or you know, off in your secluded private world.
Yeah, well,
this family is going through.
Yeah, no, I would say it sucks balls. I mean, I'm going through it. I'm going through it right now, and I'm like, it doesn't, you know.
300 pages. If I just said that.
Hey, you could have cut so much out. No, but I think there was a line in the book. It's, you know, you are your children's parents, or your parents' child, and then you move on, and then you become your child's parent. And then that just separates, you know, and you know this, because you went through it yourself. You felt that separation, and it's a process that is quite amazing. And unlike, you know, birds, you just kick the bird out of the nest, and, you know, go fly, and then they're off to, you know, lay some new eggs. It's for humans, it's like we go through a very challenging process. Now, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but, you know, how accurate is this? I'm sure a lot of the technical aspects of the book are, of course, correct. It's actually funny, because early on I'm like, AB, what is AB? Oh, okay, that would be assault and battery. You know, it actually challenged me a little bit to think about stuff. This can't be entirely the way a case like this would go. There must be some embellishment or things that would not fit in the real world, or am I incorrect?
No, well, you know, I wouldn't say embellishment. The main difference between this case and a real case is that it moves faster. In real life, things tend to move very slowly, and it simply drains all the drama out of the story. You know, when you're telling a story like this, the main change that you make ordinarily is for compression. It's for pacing, and it's a matter of keeping your plot taut and keeping the reader turning those pages, which is your first responsibility as a storyteller. But, you know, I have always felt that I wanted my books to feel authentic, and I wanted lawyers and cops who picked these books up to feel like, oh, that could happen. You know, so there are definitely things that you'll see in there that don't go quite according to the way they would go in the real world. But within the limits of, within the demands of storytelling, it's about as authentic as I could make it.
With you know, a lot of people who aren't familiar with the legal profession, you know, there's lots of jokes about lawyers, etc. But I've always seen people in law, and particularly prosecutors, I would say, as fantastic storytellers. You know, because you have a job to do and you have a story to tell. So I'm surprised, quite frankly, that there aren't a lot more people from the legal profession writing novels, because it's what you do, really.
It is true. When you stand up in front of a jury, you know, you are telling a story. I was very surprised when back when I was a DA, I went to a training, a national training, and a prominent trial lawyer spoke to us, and he told us that the first thing we needed to understand is that you needed to have what he called the story of the case. It wasn't enough to have the evidence. You needed to have the story, the narrative that you were going to present to the jury. And it's exactly what professional storytellers do. You know, it's finding the most convincing story to tell. And it is good training. it's very good training for storytellers of all kinds. And it's no wonder that lawyers are drawn to writing and that storytellers are drawn to law, because it's sort of a natural process for them. And in fact, you even see sort of in a self-reflexive way, you see that in this book, because the book is told by this lawyer, Andy Barber, as he testifies to a grand jury. You know, if you think about movies like The Usual Suspects, or that old Kevin Costner flick, it was called No Way Out, in which he was responding to a Q&A. And so he's narrating the story for you as he's testifying. And so the storyteller is within the four corners of the screen.
Right.
So, you know, there's a convergence between this lawyer's role as a storytelling lawyer and as the narrator within the novel.
And I think people, you know, don't realize, you know, in the story you talk about the oh shit moment when you're a defendant, and I've had this happen to me, as I said, in a civil case where the other party, the lawyer, gets up, starts telling the story, and I'm like, oh crap, that makes me sound totally wrong. You know, it's like, and you start to almost, you know, doubt yourself. It's like, wait a minute, this, and because he's such a good storyteller and is convinced of it in some way. It's really fascinating. And again, this really puts it all into a great book. And it is, you know, some 450 pages, but you do not want to stop, because it's very easy to read. It really flows. So you've definitely achieved your mission with getting people to turn the page, and it's not, you know, it's completely understandable. It's really, as you said, it's not really about a trial of the century, although it is, but it's much more a story that people can relate to. I was looking at the back cover, and just one name caught my eye. Stephen Fry says, brilliantly conceived. Now, do you know Stephen Fry?
No, I don't know any of the authors who blurbed this book. In fact, it's funny, I got one of the blurbs is from Nicholas Sparks, who, you know, for Nicholas Sparks to blurb a crime novel is unheard of. And this sort of tells you sort of what a good discussion generator this book is, what a good book club book it is. When you finish this book, you really want to turn and talk about it. There's a lot going on there. And when Nicholas Sparks, he emailed my editor with the blurb, and then he promptly called my editor because the book hadn't been published yet, and he didn't know who else he could talk about it with. So he called her, and for 20 minutes he was regaling her with these, you know, his thoughts about the book. And she, by the way, hadn't even seen the blurb, because an email came in from Nicholas Sparks. It got caught in her spam box.
Of course. I was like, that can't be real.
It doesn't happen. So she was, you know, hurriedly looking through her spam box trying to find that blurb. We almost lost that blurb. If he hadn't called, we wouldn't have had it.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
So, but it's sort of, you know, from the beginning there was something different about this book. You know, this is actually my third book. But, you know, from the moment we started sending it out for blurbs, it was just generating this crazy response that was out of all proportion to anything I've experienced before. And it's continued right through the editing process. You know, all the people we sent it out for blurbs were doing cartwheels for it. And then all the people in-house at Random House, the sales staff and the editorial staff, were doing cartwheels for it. And then it's just kept rolling and rolling. You know, the day it came out on January 31st, just a few weeks ago. The day it came out, it was #1 on the Barnes & Noble list by lunchtime.
Yeah, fantastic.
There for weeks. It's just sort of, it's been an amazing ride. And that's not me, by the way. You know, my other books, I'm not the guy at the front of the bookstore. I'm the guy who has to go fishing around at the back of the bookstore to find the one lonely copy of my book, if it's even there.
Right, right.
An amazing, surreal experience.
No, that's fantastic. And you know, the question, of course, it begs the question: at what point did you decide to become a writer and storyteller outside of being a prosecutor? And I guess a logical follow-up is it more satisfying?
Is it more satisfying? Well, it's more satisfying in a way. I think one of the drawbacks of being a lawyer is that no matter how brilliantly you try a case, no matter how good you are, you don't create anything lasting. You know, when you walk out of that courtroom, the case goes away, and as time goes, memories fade. And, you know, you're building up sort of your reputation, but you don't create this durable artwork. I remember when I was in law school, I read Lonesome Dove, which was a favorite book of mine and of a friend who I was in law school with. And I remember thinking, and discussing with him, why would we devote ourselves to this when we can create, a lasting achievement like a novel? If Larry McMurtry had gone out and got hit by a bus, Lonesome Dove would live for 100 years.
Right.
Or longer. So, in that way, it's more satisfying. As for, when I decided to become a writer and all that, I think if you're a writer, you always have that urge. And it's not, it's not always clear that you're going to act on it, but it's always there. When I set out to do this, actually what I was trying to do was just write one novel. I never set out to become a writer. There's no writers or artists of any kind in my background, and honestly, I just didn't think you could earn a living doing this. I didn't really know anyone.
Well, that begs the question: can you make a living doing this?
Well, you can. It turns out you can. Less so now. It's becoming harder. The publishing industry has changed. It's getting harder and harder, but you definitely can. You definitely can. And it took me a long time to even get to the point where I had that one publishable book, and I spent most of the 1990s as I was an assistant DA churning out really horrible books. And that's but I'm a stubborn bastard, basically. I kept at it until I had this one publishable book that turned out to be my first novel, which was called Mission Flats. And the way I stayed in it actually was I got a 2-book deal. And so that means, the downside of that is you have to actually write the book.
Exactly.
At that point, you become, instead of a one-book man, you become a writer. And that's how people look at you.
Well, Bill, I think you have a hit on your hands here, and that, of course, makes your your follow-up that more challenging. I'm sure you've already started thinking about what you're going to write next.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not challenging at all. I feel like, it's very hard for the outside world to put more pressure on me than I put on myself. I feel like I'm always swinging for the fences. I'm always lying awake nights, sweating these books.
Right.
And so I don't feel the least bit of additional pressure because of this. I just feel privileged, honestly, to be able to do it. I feel like, in our society, it is a privilege to be a writer. It's a handful of people, relatively speaking, who get to do this. And so my goal is to be worthy of that.
And we'll definitely propagate the message about reading this one because, as I said, I almost would not want to. It'd be great if there was a movie, but knowing a bit how Hollywood works, it would be, how the heck are they going to do this and really portray it, right? It's hard.
It's a different art form, and this book uses the medium that it's in. It's told partly through transcripts and in different voices,
right?
Because it's a text-based medium, and so it uses text to sort of control the tone and to control the audience's experience. Motion pictures are a picture-based medium, and so it will change and it'll use different strengths. But that opens up new possibilities also. So I hope people will come to this first, only because it's a totally different category. Lots of good books become bad movies, and bad books become good movies, and they're really just distant cousins.
I think you've hit on it exactly there, and that's why I would recommend people really get the physical version of the book, the hardcover, if possible. Because you're right, it uses the medium in a way that cannot be replicated. Certainly not on ebooks. That's why I'm always happy when I get a physical book, because I think I really would have missed out. I guess. On the ebook, do they do images of the transcripts, or is it literally just a different typeface they use?
It's not even a different typeface; it's a different size. That's the only clue that you get that you're in this different format. And it's just we're really in the infancy of ebooks, and the whole idea of book design has been kind of out the window when it comes to ebooks, and that's the price of. We want to have scalable fonts, and we want to have, a few different viewing options, so the page has to flow like an ordinary web page, which is all an ebook is, basically. And so, that really limits what book designers can do. And you have to think that in the future that will change, that book design will come back. Certainly, on the web, there's no shortage of innovative visual design.
Right.
And that really hasn't made it to ebook readers yet, although increasingly, it's the e-ink readers that are especially limited. And I own one and I enjoy those. I'm not knocking them. But as reading moves over to tablets, and the iPad is perfectly capable of reproducing all kinds of complex formatting that would look beautiful. We just haven't got there yet.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Well, yes, that will happen. Yes, it is technically possible, but in the meantime, this is what you want to get. Defending Jacob, William Landay. It's a fantastic book. To get it right now, if you're watching this in the app, just tap on the blue button above me. It'll take you to the Amazon store. You can pick it up from there, or any of the links underneath the video. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations on this. This is a big success, and I think Letterman next, man. I can see it. Why not? I mean,
step down from you. Come on.
See, flattery will get you everywhere. I really appreciate the time. Good luck, and hopefully speak next time when you got your next novel out.
Anytime, Adam. Love to.
Okay.
Thanks.